So my name is Shirley Edgerton. I have lived in Pittsfield for, I think it's been approximately 28 years. I was born in South Carolina, primarily raised in Westchester County in Mount Vernon, New York. So my experiences living in the Berkshires as a person of color, I've always found very interesting, having that dichotomy of New York and the world of the Berkshires, two very different worlds. I have raised 3 children here, plus many others that I claim. I'm retired out of state government, and I'm currently the cultural proficiency coach in the Pittsfield Public Schools, and I'm also associated with a few other organizations. I don't think that's funny.
So again, I'm Eden Renee. My last name is Hayes. I was born in Arkansas, raised in California, college in Connecticut, graduate school in New Orleans. My postdoc was in Pennsylvania after Katrina, and then I saw the job ad for Bard College at Simon's Rock and was like, okay, this looks pretty cool. And I clearly got the job. That was 10 years ago, so I've been here for a long time. I'm now raising 2 young, beautiful, wonderful, rambunctious children, a 1.5-year-old and a 6-year-old, and basically watching what their experiences are, how they're learning and growing as they try to figure out what happens and you know what's involved in terms of being a black kid and being a black kid in a predominantly white area.
I say there's 2 Berkshires. There's, and I draw the line. The line is Guido's. So I'm on the side of Guido's, which is not the wealthy side, the prosperous side, okay? Born in Pittsfield, unfortunately, none of what I experienced in my youth can I take my grandchildren and show them because of our first phase of institutional racism, which I define as urban removal. When they removed all of the neighborhoods and community, and within that community was clearly the strength of what we had. They destroyed the village. I grew up in a fatherless household, never missing a father, because I had 3 in the community. And I often hoped that I only had 1, because I could have gotten away with more. Because it would have been less eyes watching. And I have 3, actually 4 wonderful grandchildren. The 3 I associate with the most because they're right here. I always say, not that I ever criticize God's work, but I always say he should have given us grandchildren first. We'd have been better parents. They are my life cycle. They are what keeps me going. They are the energy and when mine.
Knowing that you're a cultural competency coach and that training and initiatives are on the rise in education and the workplace, what do you find to be the strength of these trainings?
I think there are several levels to cultural competency. We can take it from the perspective as each of us in here are individuals and what it can do for us if we open up ourselves to the experience. Cultural competency is about awareness, but you personally have to be aware of your culture before you start to have a better understanding and increase your knowledge in other cultures. I think cultural competency could contribute greatly to the state of unrest that our country is in once again. It's not like it left it, but we kind of have those ebb and flows, and we can probably debate why we're currently in this situation. My personal belief is that it certainly has a lot to do with our past president as to why we're currently in this cycle once again historically. But I think cultural competency provides an opportunity for us as individuals to be self-reflective, because that's the initial work for each of us to make a determination of where we are, to get in touch with our biases, because we all have them. I mean, I would like to think I don't have biases, but I certainly do.
Oftentimes, when Black people are sharing their experiences of marginalization and racism, they're quickly met with responses of people equating their own difficult experiences with that of the continuous cyclical oppression stemming as far as the transatlantic slave trade. How might Black people be able to navigate these conversations and share their own experiences without being minimized or invalidated?
So in addition to being minimized and invalidated, what I've seen most is people being very defensive. When pointing out, like, hey, what you said was actually pretty offensive. Actually, no, please don't try to touch my hair. It's like, please don't try to exoticize me. I'm just a person. And what I see more often than not is really great defensiveness. Like, oh, I'm just trying to play you a compliment. It's like, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. Oh, it's just a joke. What I see many times is they're called microaggressions. Is that basically, people who are probably trying to be friendly, but don't realize that their friendliness is actually the exact opposite and pushing someone away. I really like the term, it is death by 1,000 paper cuts, because it's so often and pervasive that we're, being the minority in a community. It means that any one person giving a microaggression, there's already been another one by someone else that I've encountered today. And so that means that a lot of these microaggressions get targeted, towards someone because they're the person that is representative, of whatever the demographic is. It's technically literally my job to educate people, because I am the Dean of Equity and Inclusion at Simon's Rock. But for most Black people that you see, it's not their job to educate you. And doing so requires a ton of emotional labor. But for the people who are committing the microaggressions, educate yourselves. This is the world that we live in now. If your feet are on this globe, you are biased. You need to accept it. You need to Google. You need to read this book called White Fragility. White Fragility, yes, I will repeat it. It's called White Fragility. Read the book. If you don't have time for a book, look for one of the articles written by the author. Look for it. Do the different things that you need to do to educate yourself, so you're not putting somebody else through great emotional labor after you have offended them.
Mr. Powell, how has the scope and mission of the NAACP evolved since its founding in 1909? And as a follow-up, do you think Black people are still facing the same issues, or have those too evolved and changed?
Is that a rhetorical question? Well, when you really, I don't think evolve is the word. I think continuing the struggle. 1909 is no different from 2019 in the work that the NAACP is involved in. When you really look around at what's going on, we're talking about education. We're talking about justice. We're talking about the 13th, 14th Amendment, which gave rights. And here we are in 2019. We're still having that discussion. it's a new type of slavery, but it is very much the same thing, because now it's debtor prisons, it's school to prison pipeline, it's injustice for our youth, and that's what enabled me to survive in this community. I remember my son, after his mother died, and I would apply for a job, and I'd come home and he'd say, "Well, Dad, did you get the job?" I said, "No, didn't get that job, but we're moving up." And he'd look at me and he'd say, "What do you mean you're moving up?" I said, "Yeah, I was overqualified." And I laughed, and he didn't see the humor in that. And I tried to explain, because he said, "You did everything that they say we are supposed to do. You went to college." First he said you graduated from high school. You went in the service. You went to college. You taught at the most prestigious cooking school in the world. And you can't get a job in the Berkshires. And I said, I couldn't get that job. But you notice I didn't quit the job I had in looking for that job. So I was always able to stay employed. But I also have to say it's very tough when you're trying to raise children and you're trying to guide them in your path of, everybody said you go to school, you get your education, blah, 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 this is the way you move. It's not true for everybody. And I wore boots and they had straps on them, and I don't care how many times I pulled them up. I still didn't move forward. I saw people with less credentials than I be employed. Okay? So it doesn't matter what your credentials are. It doesn't matter what you go through in life to build yourself. You still do not move up that ladder or through that chain because of one reason. And I'm going to tell you, you always send your resume ahead. I've had jobs based on my resume and lost them when I showed up and they saw who I was. And this is the profoundness of it that people don't understand. We're judged sight seeing, period. When they looked at my resume, they couldn't tell I was black. They figured a black man went to Basel, Switzerland, and entered any international cooking competition. They probably don't even know where Switzerland is. So they had no idea. And then when you show up, the job either wasn't available or it became a lesser position than what I applied for. So this is what we cope with. This is what we endure. I speak truth to power because I believe it's time we do that if we're going to move the needle. I'm not going to say what you want to hear. I'm going to say what you need to hear.
Dr. Renee and Ms. Shirley Everton, how did you, as young black women and black girls, navigate this line?
The line of
Double conscious.
the line of double consciousness. Oh gosh, that one was easy. To pinpoint, I think a lot of it really was, living in so many different places and seeing what the different possibilities were in terms of the way that people treat you, the exposure that I would have to different readings, being assigned to me and by teachers, but to different ideas, and noticing I do have to figure out how to walk this line of having integrity in myself as an individual, as a black woman, but also figuring out how to help other people through their issues with like not really valuing my presence in this space. And that's been, you know, a lot of, you know, a day-to-day, you know, kind of like playing hopscotch and like jumping a line like over and over and over and trying to figure out how is it that I get through this. And I'm not sure I've 100% figured it out all the time. There's constantly like another context that I'm in, and I'm just like, okay, how do I figure out my way through this and say word things in a way where people will actually hear what I'm saying and not just think that I'm on my soapbox, or you know, I'm too young to know, you know, or I don't know why, but I have a PhD. You don't have to listen to me, but somehow sometimes I'm not credentialed enough to know. Now I've had a PhD for, gosh, 13 years now. Yeah, but still, you know, there's still the question, and the, you know, I disagree. It's just like, fine, go ahead, disagree. It's like, go ahead, you can have your opinion, you know, but I'm seeing, you know, what's going to happen to like towards this opinion because you have this opinion over time. And I'm telling you, you know, you should really consider what I'm saying because you're shutting a lot of people, a lot of doors, you know, right now that you don't want to shut. And trying to help people to realize what's going on and help them through it. And again, that requires a whole lot of emotional labor. And emotional labor drives me into greater self-care to try to make sure that I'm taken care of, that I'm not going to sit here and have a stroke or a heart attack because of everything that I'm constantly trying to do to help people through their issues.
It's a great question. I think for me, because I was raised in New York, the suburbs, not to suggest that we'll get to growing up in the Berkshires, but part of it was I lived in a mixed neighborhood from the beginning. There were blacks, there were whites, but there was a strong black presence in my life in terms of my family. A weekend, at least once a month, my aunt would take us, my sister and I, on the subway into Harlem, and we would go to a black bookstore and buy a book. And obviously it was a black bookstore, so it would be about us, about our heritage, about our culture. So I grew up with that. I grew up with a strong sense of embracing my heritage, embracing my culture. I had mentors and role models in the church because my choices growing up were to go to church or stay home. Those were pretty much my choices. But I had some incredible role models in the church. Women who were professionals, women who had managed to deal with the switching. You know, the code switching as we call it today. You know, I tell a lot of the young women that I work with today, I said, do you think I talk like this all the time? I said, when I go back home to Mount Vernon, please. I said, so you have to understand, you know, this is our reality, that there's a certain, there's a certain expectation, there's assumptions about who we are and our lack. I said, so the reality is, as long as there are issues around race and racism is alive and well, then we're going to have to continue to figure out how to move through the systems. And it's traumatic. You know, I look at the young people today that I work with, and some days I go home so distraught because I don't think sometimes those who offend our young people the most are those who think that they care for them. And I just find that so disturbing sometimes when I try to have an exchange with an educator and I try to explain to them, you can't speak to that young woman like that. You can't use that language. Your expectations have to be greater for that young man. That's going to be a young man of color in the community. You can't coddle him. You have to make him understand that he has responsibilities. So often You know, as the doctor here said, you know, people think you get on your soapbox. You can think that, but I'm going to get on my soapbox. Because for me, you know, I'm trying to support and help these young people of color get through this maze of life that we've created for them. No, I haven't created. I take no responsibility for that. I live in it too. You know, so I think, like, you know, Dennis said, all of us grow up with that mother's wit. You know, we're told you have to be better than. I was told the same thing. You know, I didn't have a choice about education. Come home with a D or F, please. Do you know what I'd end up for a week or two with a D or F on my report card? You know, and on Sundays I had to take off my Sunday best and put on my play clothes because, you know, that was my grandmother's way of preparing us to understand how we needed to present ourselves in the larger world. We had on our Sunday go to meeting shoes, you know, had on our, she's smiling like, you know, our best outfits on Sunday because that was part of the preparation for us to be able to survive in this world. But again, the greatest concern I have, you know, the deeper and the longer I'm in this work in the community is how it impacts the self-esteem of our young people. And so many of our young people of color, if they had more role models, you know, if they had people who had better understanding of what they're living every day, that would decrease some of the behaviors that we're always focused on. Their behaviors and their attitudes are often the symptoms of the racism that they're dealing with every day. Those microaggressions that the professor just talked about, the biases, you know, the sitting in the back of the classroom. It's no secret, you know, all we have to do is do the research, and the Berkshires is no different. You know, their disparate treatment when it comes to suspension. Who suspended the most? Young men of color. And those students that are in special education. So it's no secret. The research is there. The information is there, what we're doing to our young people. So, all right, I'm off my soapbox.
For a second, I heard the passionate voice.
Yeah.
Shit, what did I do? No, you couldn't be any more on point. So with that relationship with your aunt and the young professionals and making the visits up to Harlem and the mother's wit that you mentioned, what do you think young women that you work with need the most support in with the college process, the college application process?
That's a good question. I think even before we get to that application, it's helping them to accept the fact that they're brilliant, they have potentials, and that they can do it. I mean, that's the hardest part right there. I just had this conversation, you know, Eden is also a mentor in Rope. And we just had this conversation no more than 2 months ago. This young woman, all the mentors think she's bright, she has all of these possibilities, and she's sitting looking at us, telling us how, well, you know, I didn't do so good in school, I don't know if I could really go to college. We're like, what? You're brilliant. She's a leader. She's an activist. She has enormous potentials to do so many great things in the world, and she's doubting her abilities. So the hardest process is before you even get to the paper is to help our young women to understand that they are worthy of a university education, that they have the ability to do well. That young woman who didn't even think she could go to a community college went through a bridge program. The end of that summer program, she ended up with $1,500 because she was so successful. I just left her in North Carolina 3 weeks ago at the four-year university. She made the dean's list.
The young women that you worked with in Rope, after they returned back to Pittsfield to visit you and share their experience, what did they relay to you about the impact of Rope?
Well, they talk about, now they get why we deal with them the way we do. We're very loving, okay? But but we also don't cut any corners. Yeah, because again, we see sometimes that that's what they get in the school system. There's too much, oh, I understand. Oh, well, no, we don't understand. Why didn't you do your homework? Oh, I understand, No, we don't understand. Why didn't you show up for your class? I had to, yeah, you had this issue. And what does that have to do with you skipping class? Okay? So they understand. And they also understand that being that we have shared, that they have a responsibility to share with those that are here. And so that's an expectation, and that occurs with them. I got a call the other day. Don't start me talking about my girls, okay? I got a call the other day. One of our young women, she's a junior at MCLA. She wants to do a workshop for the current group. She wants us to bring the girls up, and she wants to talk about being a young woman and being in college. And we're like, I love it, just absolutely love it. And just some of the things that our young women have done. I can just run down a list of some of the graduates who, in 2018, who graduated and the places that they are now. And so it's great. They get it, sense of responsibility, and that those who, much is given, much is required.
Dr. Eden Renee, given your professional background in social psychology, how would you explain the phenomenon of Black children associating Americanness and goodness with whiteness, even at a young age, as exemplified through social experiments such as draw a picture of American or which is the good or bad doll?
And I have no idea why we think that they would do anything different than what they've been doing. There are way too many messages that they are unwittingly getting having to do with, Americans are white, good people are white, everything positive, draw a white person. So I've been in update, although this is a little bad because I haven't told my current principal what I've been doing. You assign like little things there. My son is in kindergarten up in Pittsfield, and I'll just leave it at that. But basically, one day he came home, and I go through his folder, see like what he's done, and it's like Thanksgiving week basically, and almost everything that's come home has to do with turkeys. And I'm just like, okay, no problem. Then one day he comes home, sheet of paper, and it is a pilgrim that he has colored as a white girl, because that's what the directions told him to do. Color the hair yellow. Color the dress like this. I was like, what's going on with this? I'm like, what's this color here for the skin tone? That's called flesh tone. I'm like, excuse me? What color is this? What color are you? What color is daddy? What color is the baby? What color is Nana? He was like, oh yeah. I was like, but all the kids call it flesh tone. I'm just like, no. There are other colors in here that are also flesh tone. Like they're teaching my little black child to call the peach crayon flesh tone. Like, what is going on here? And they literally, the directions were basically color a black and white picture into a white girl. Color the hair yellow. I asked the teacher about it because, thank the good Lord, that we had parent-teacher conferences maybe a week later. And I asked her about it and what happened to defensiveness. So, oh no, I hope you're not saying that had something to do with race. But that was about coloring. They're still getting a message here. It's really, really evident what they're drawing for the pictures, for the kids to be able to see. So why would they color an American or a good person as anything other than white?
Lose self-respect for their beauty, for who they are, the fact that they are beautiful and they don't have to make any changes. I always tell the story when my wife passed away that the funeral director called me up and asked me if I wanted him to fix my wife's teeth. said, what's wrong with her teeth? Oh, she got this big gap in the front. I said, all African queens have that. And please leave it alone. It's not a deficiency. You know, so it's about, and Shirley mentioned the young girls, but our boys are also lacking in self-esteem, self-worth. Why? Because they have been told that they are criminals, that they're useless, they're worthless. And you say it enough, it becomes the reality. When my granddaughter was born, I called her Madam President. And that's how I talk to her every time I speak to her. She laughs about it, and I told her, because that's where you're going to be. I'll probably be in a wheelchair, but I'll be sitting there listening to your inaugural address. And I say that because it's so important. That's when the seed was planted. And let's not forget, it was called the White House for a reason. It was called the White House for a reason. There was never any intention for anyone of color to occupy that house. All right?
Yeah, sorry, I'm kind of cheating because I have the mic. I just had a comment. I think it's really important. I also want to just say thank you guys so much for being up here and holding this. Thanks to Stephanie for emceeing. I think it's really important that we listen to what you're saying around getting reactive and defensive, and I think it's really important for those of us who are white in the room to be asking ourselves, like, what are we doing in this community to make it safer for people of color to live here, right? Like, the art supplies aren't racist, we are. So what are we doing to unlearn that? What are the questions that we're asking ourselves? And I am just really grateful to Bridge for helping me to do some of that work myself. So I just wanted to say that and just ask folks in the audience to be just thinking about our own behavior and how that shows up and what we're hearing about microaggressions and from folks' experiences.
And the Latino community is growing faster than the Black community. So yes, there is growth. And that's why it worries me so much that our systems aren't prepared for the growth that's occurring. But on the other hand, I don't want to seem like I don't have hope, because I also see a lot of good things happening, in terms of young people of color, like the doctor here, in key positions where they can help with policies. They can help develop practices that create a more inclusive environment. So I do see some of those things happening. There's some of us who are in that well-seasoned age group where we're very intentionally supporting younger adults of color to prepare themselves to move into key positions. So, and not just people of color, just trying to be supportive. Like in the city of Pittsfield, our mayor openly talks about being inclusive. She talks about cultural competency, the superintendent of schools, that's why I was hired. The city council just voted to provide cultural competency training for all of the councilmen. Our new district attorney for the county clearly has embraced inclusiveness and talks about equity and justice constantly. So I see a lot of positives happening, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
We can vote, and we know the power of that vote. So I am very encouraged that we are going to, there's a young group at Williams College, the Griffin Society, who come down to Pittsfield and work with our young men. Shirley does an excellent job with the young ladies in our community. We need mentors for our young men. We need to give them that guidance.